Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to look at the latest on Storm Bert, which is going to be arriving through Saturday with some of the impacts lasting all the way into Sunday. We are going to see some heavy snow in northern regions, heavy rain further southwards, and especially in the second half of the weekend, and also widespread strong winds with numerous yellow warnings issued for all of that and an amber warning issued for some of that snow across parts of Scotland. Beyond that, we will have a look at the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature as we do head into the final week of autumn, of November, as it is looking like it's going to go back towards typical autumnal conditions with more of a westerly flow with average temperatures, precipitation around but not too overwhelming. Now we are going to see a break from the cold weather that we have had at the moment, but it might not last all too long. As we see on some of the longer range charts, there are fairly strong signs that blocking will return into early December. Exactly what sort of blocking will return, whether it will be in a similar position it's been this week, driving cold northerly winds, maybe even easterly winds, or whether it's just going to be sat over the top of us. Still yet to be determined, but definitely some fairly strong signals that that could be appearing as we do head in towards the start of meteorological winter. As I said, we'll check all of that out in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, we have got a brief area of high pressure pushing in at the moment. Recording this around 5 PM on Friday, so we are in the lull, we're in the calm before the storm. And you can see that showers are still around in northern regions, but they're starting to be cut off and temperatures are slowly starting to rise as the wind comes in from more of a westerly direction instead of a northerly direction. The showers aren't coming in as far inland, and you can see they're more coming west to east instead of north to south, like they have been over much of this week. And you can see further southwards, it is much drier and it will cause a frost overnight tonight. We still have cold air aloft, but we are seeing that slow transition to something milder through the weekend. Now, if you look at temperatures at the moment, you can still see it is cold, if not very cold in places. Temperatures will once again get down towards freezing. Remember, I'm recording this around 5 PM. Sunset was only an hour or so ago, and already temperatures are close to freezing for most regions. So last big frost coming probably for November. There is the risk next week potentially in places, but for up and down the country, this is probably the last frost we will see for this colder spell before that rain arrives tomorrow. And if we do go back to the live radar, you can see the peripheries here of Storm Bert starting to move into the far south of the Republic of Ireland, but really it's into Saturday morning. That's when the main impacts do start to arrive. Now, if you go over to the weather warnings, you can see we've got this massive jumble of warnings. Now, we did look through pretty much all of these in yesterday's video. We did flesh it out quite a lot, so do look at that video if you want more interest in these warnings. We haven't seen major changes. I have gone through each one individually, and we've not seen any major changes other than a few changes in the descriptions, perhaps some slight alterations in locations and extent. And we have seen a new warning issued for the far south of England through Sunday, through Saturday into Sunday for stronger winds, but it's nothing too unusual. It's kind of that bog standard 60 to 70 mile per hour gusts. So do check this out in yesterday's video, or go into the Met Office website for yourself to have a look at this in detail. But the main sort of impacts are snow in the north, wind pretty much everywhere, and then rain further southwards and westwards. And even those areas that see snow, it does transition to more rain through into Sunday. And you can see into Sunday's warning, we still got some of those yellow warnings still remaining for significant impacts. It is going to be a very lively system. I don't think it's going to be, extremely significant compared to some storms we've seen over in recent years, but I still think there will be disruption. Again, if it was happening sort of midweek during rush hour times, then perhaps the impacts could be a little bit more disruptive. But at the moment, it does look like it will be a very lively system, dangerous in places, heavy snow in places, but it will clear through the second half of the weekend, giving slightly drier conditions as we head into the start of next week. So if we do go over to the UKV now to have a look at the latest precipitation and temperature and wind gust charts, you can see the storm is moving through this evening. We start to see thicker cloud later on tonight, and you can see the heavy rain and heavy snow starts to arrive. Heavy snow initially through the morning for many northern regions, but it does start to turn back to rain for low-lying areas pretty early on, and it's more exclusively over higher ground through much of the morning. Now, we're not actually expecting too much duration for the snow. It's just going to be very, very heavy, which means significant accumulations of 5 to 10 centimetres could occur in a matter of an hour or two before it does transition back to rain. So it will be very sudden impacts, but hopefully for most, apart from the highest ground, 300-400 metres plus, most it should turn back to rain by around lunchtime. Those regions that are higher elevation, this is where we've got potentially 10 to 20 centimetres, and specifically for Scotland there we can see it last into the early hours of the afternoon. That's where we could see maybe 20 or 30 centimetres, but it is mostly higher rural areas. So for the majority of the population there could be snow in the morning before it does clear by lunchtime and is replaced by more heavy rain through the afternoon into the evening. Now, the big thing with this system is not only are we seeing an initial weather front moving through, the cold front behind it within the system does take a very long time to clear, and it keeps getting reinforced from the southwest, and we continue to see more heavy rain all the way through Sunday. So especially from kind of Saturday lunchtime, the main impacts will be from that rain, gusty winds as the system does slowly clear. For those areas in the south, we could see relentless batches of rain through Saturday afternoon all the way through to Sunday evening, for eventually into Monday the heaviest rain clears and we see again some showers. As we head into Tuesday and Wednesday, we do actually see some back-edge northerly winds with a brief area of high pressure in the North Atlantic. So we could actually see a reintroduction of that colder air. And you can see a bit of a channel low developing. Again, the risk of a bit of snow. But if we do have a look at the upper air temperature, you can see the coldest air is still further northwards. It's not quite cold enough further southwards by a couple of degrees to see any snow there. And I do think this air mass moving in is fairly transient. So we're not looking at anything too significant, even though this chart actually does look quite meaningful for wintry risks. We're actually not likely to see all too much because it is very, very transient next week, but it could give a frost in places. If you look at the wind gusts, you can see the winds really picking up overnight tonight. Strongest winds probably moving around the morning with that snow and rain, so there could be a real big significant window there of a few hours in the morning where we see heavy snow, heavy rain and very strong winds all coinciding together. 50 to 60 widely, 60 to 70 towards coastal regions, and maybe an isolated 70 to 80. Those winds do hang around for the whole of Saturday, and especially further southwards we see stronger winds through Sunday and even into Monday, eventually for northern regions. So it's not going to be sort of those top 80, 90 mile per hour winds we've seen in storms over the past few years, but it is going to be relentless 50 to 70 mile per hour. So it is going to be kind of non-stop for about 24 hours, these reoccurring waves of very strong gusty winds. So again, not the most extreme we've seen, but it is going to be pretty relentless there over the weekend. As we head into Monday, though, those winds will eventually die down. Still gusty, but will die down. And you can see as we head in towards the middle of the week, those winds start to turn light. And this is where we could see potentially some more frosts in the north. Now, overnight tonight, you can see temperatures dropping widely down towards freezing, down towards maybe only 0 to 1 degree in the far south, so slightly milder here, but still a frost in most places. As we head into Saturday, those temperatures do rise quite quickly through the morning in western regions, and by the afternoon could be well into the double digits for parts of western England, Wales, into the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. You can see those northern regions where it's still cold. That's where we still have a bit of snow. Now eventually, into Sunday it will be much milder for all, potentially even 15 or 16 degrees during the afternoon, and then it stays a bit chillier into Monday, back towards average, and this is where we could see some frosts in the north, maybe even further southwards for Wednesday. We can see it's not completely widespread, there are plenty of areas still a couple of degrees above freezing. So yeah, there definitely could be some chilly conditions next week, but nowhere near as cold as we have seen this week, and as I said, it most likely will be transient. Now, if we head over to the longer range charts now, if we do start on the geofencing, so can see it looks very cold still, but very quickly that block towards green and dissipates in the next 24 hours or so. Storm Bert moves through and it does go pretty unsettled. Next week, you can see that transient northerly wind through Tuesday into Wednesday, but eventually high pressure builds in and we do see a change once again in the wind direction. In the subsequent days, there is the risk of blocking returning towards Greenland for early December. You see, it's a very jumbled chart here with no real strong signal of any specific air mass, it definitely does look very blocked over the northern hemisphere. It doesn't quite pull off very cold conditions. Instead, it's more dry and frosty, but it still looks fairly blocked with a quite unusual North Atlantic and Northern Hemisphere view. Now you can see there's nothing special here on the 12 o'clock run. If we go back to the 6 o'clock run, you can see right towards the end of the chart, look at this, a very cold northerly wind. That block is slightly further westwards and northwards, and we are here very cold, very wintry. Look at those potential equivalent temperature, the temperature deviation, significantly below average. And also we would be likely seeing lots of snow across northern Europe. So you can see here, GFS definitely toying with the idea of that blocking returning into early December. As you can see by the midday run, it could just sit over the top of us, frosty, cold, but nothing too wintry at all, or wintry at all really. And then the 6 o'clock run, that blocks slightly further westwards and northwards, very cold air mass moving in, and we see similar conditions to what we've seen this week. So you can definitely see longer term, not definitely going cold, but colder weather is definitely on the cards, definitely not looking westerly and stormy. The sort of storm we're seeing with Bert over the next 24 hours really is an anomaly with the breakdown of this colder weather. Longer term though, definitely looks like blocking is going to be returning in some sort of capacity, but it's just how cold will it be? Now, if you look at the latest GEM, again, very similar, storm Bert breaking through. We see that transient northerly next week. And then once again, towards day 10, it's a very unusual setup toward the northern hemisphere, blocking still towards Greenland. This anomalous low containing some very cold air towards Iceland. That could be a real big storm there for Iceland. And we're kind of in between all of this with colder air masses at times, milder air masses at times, and eventually by day 10, we've got a block to our north, but the jet stream is still coming in from the west. And it's really a jumbled, mixed signals here from the GEM. We can look at the northern hemisphere view, and you can see there is lots of blocking. All the tropospheric polar vortex is all split apart, no real coherence. So although we are actually westerly at the surface level, the overall northern hemisphere view is really not conducive to a big stormy westerly wind, pest from the west pattern that we can see in December and specifically early on in the winter. So although, yes, not very cold, it is nonetheless still very interesting and not the usual pest from the west pattern that we can see. So yeah, nothing cold, but still big interest for that early December period. And finally, if we compare it to the ECMWF, it is broadly very similar over the coming days. That northerly flow coming back in early next week, high pressure building in, and once again, look to our north, we've got that blocking trying to appear towards Greenland. We are pulling a northerly wind in for a time in early December, but it doesn't quite win out that block, and towards the end of the run we do start to see a bit more organisation there from the tropospheric polar vortex. So you see it's a lot more organised here from the ECMWF, a bit more colder towards the first few days, but a bit more organised here, so this would be more symbolic of a westerly flow. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens, but it definitely doesn't look like it's going to, it would guaranteed westerly winds. Sometime this time of year, we are really looking for a colder chart, and we can't see any. All the runs are westerly flow, storm systems, low pressure systems, mild air masses. Here, it's a lot more jumbled, a lot more opportunities, and I wouldn't be surprised through December if we did see periods of very mild weather, westerly flow, and we also saw periods of blocking, colder, frosty, or even wintry conditions. So it could be a very mixed December, as we can see that the overall northern hemisphere outlook isn't ordinary, to say the least. Now, to finish by looking at the latest ensembles, the latest GFS are just coming out at the moment. So we'll have a look at the 6 o'clock run as that goes right out to the extended range. Can see going very mild this weekend, slightly chillier for a few days next week, and then above average again for the final few days of November and into early December, and then into the first week of December, we're generally hovering around average, maybe slightly above. But you can see there are very cold runs there, just like the GFS operational run. Precipitation is kind of moderate, it's not massive, but it's not minimal. It's quite high over the coming days, but I'm talking longer term, it's nothing too crazy. If you compare to the ECMWF, again, very similar over the coming days. Well above average through the weekend, below average early next week, then above average, and then back towards average. So oscillating up and down, and you can see the UCMWF midnight run once again was pretty cold in that longer term period, and again precipitation is fairly moderate. So all the ensembles, they're hovering around average. There's colder runs, there's milder runs. There's no real distinct signal of anything that really stands out at the moment. Very jumbled. And I do think we're going to continue to see these sort of jumbled charts for the next few days at least, while the models start to figure out that sort of northern hemisphere outlook. Once we get that northern hemisphere outlook, we can start to figure out the North Atlantic, and then we can start to figure out what happens towards the UK. Because if there's blocking towards northern Canada, it has a knock-on effect to the jet stream, which eventually leads to what we see above our shores. So just as we saw from the three main models, the northern hemisphere outlook, especially towards day 10 and beyond, is completely mixed. There's no real main consensus. Normally, they're either very much a tropospheric polar vortex, succinct together. Other runs sometimes lots of blocking. We can see here that they're all over the place. ECWF was very organised, GM was really unorganised, and GFS again was a bit unorganised as well, with some blocking around. So while we still got those discrepancies in the northern hemisphere, we've got no chance predicting what's happening in the North Atlantic or towards Scandinavia or Greenland, and then no chance really looking at the UK. And that's why I keep saying these longer term charts are interesting, but we can't really draw too many conclusions because of the amount of uncertainty with the overall synoptic pattern, just generally through the northern hemisphere. So we'll have to wait and see, as I said, for those longer range, but for the time being, shorter range, looking pretty disruptive over the weekend with Storm Bert. Hopefully shouldn't be too many severe impacts, but we could see some heavy snow, especially through tomorrow morning. So if you have got any plans, do maybe consider delaying it into the afternoon or for Sunday. The weekend is looking wet and windy, whatever time you do anything. So unfortunately, that is looking like that's set in stone for most of the weekend. Again, there is a chance to dodge some of the weather fronts and some of the stronger periods of wind, but I don't think there's going to be any period where we can say for definitive. I don't think there's going to be any period where we can definitively say that it's going to be dry or it's going to be fairly still. I think it's going to be a pretty wild weekend wherever you are, and eventually dying down into Monday. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.